We're going to talk about attack surface management today. I'm Christian White, president of risk3sixty, and with me is Cory Wolff. Cory, want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Cory Wolff, I'm the director of offensive security here at risk3sixty, and yeah, me and my team are responsible for all the penetration testing, red teaming, and things like attack surface management.
What is attack surface management?
Yeah, what is attack surface management? Good question. So, at its core, attack surface management is really identifying through multiple ways your attack surface, and that could be many things. That could be things like assets, so web servers sitting out there on the internet. That could be things like cloud storage buckets, so things like S3 buckets in AWS. All the way down to things like breach data or stealer log data. So is there information that is ending up on the dark web, right? That's related to your organization. At Risk360, we encompass your attack surface as basically any exposure that could, lead to some sort of security incident or breach. So, like I said, everything from assets to storage buckets to breach data. It's understanding where those are. What kind of vulnerabilities they may have and what kind of risks they pose to the business and managing that whole process. So it's a continuous thing that's 24/7, especially here at Risk 360. We have multiple ways that we manage that and identify all these exposures. But at the end of the day, it's about really understanding what's out there, what's going to put the organization at risk, and then how to deal with it on a continuous basis.
That's a great explanation. I think when I think about attack surface management, sometimes it's helpful to like bring it back to the physical world. So once upon a time in a prior life, I was an infantry officer, served in the army, and one of my assignments as a company commander was base defense for a large base. We had a 19-kilometer perimeter. We had two major ingress points, and then fence along the entire area. And we hosted personnel as well as logistics, as well as air assets. And when I think of attack surface management from that standpoint, um, like you mentioned, it's continuous. Like we never slept in a sense. Like somebody was always on watch 24/7. We had guard towers. We had people patrolling the perimeter. We had different systems to monitor the perimeter. Even the fence had electronic systems and sensing equipment on it to identify breaches at different areas of the fence. We had different types of weapon systems at different points along the perimeter. And when we first took over that area, they were having, I won't say what other country was responsible for security, but they're having 12 to 19 breaches a month. Like if you looked at the breach data,
Yeah.
and we're like, any breach is unacceptable, even if it's just criminal breaches, people stealing stuff. Like to put personnel at risk was just unacceptable to us. So our standard was zero. And in order to achieve that, we really had to change how attack surface management was done at that base. So you mentioned a bunch of things like, one is understanding the scope of what your attack surface is, what are your assets, what are the key data sources, where might there be exposure. Could you kind of just talk through that, based on the metaphor that I gave of like a base defense? When we think of the digital world and people's assets out there, what are some of the practical things that we're doing to make sure that that continuous 24/7 defense is active and has some depth to it?
There's lots of different things that we do as far as the 24/7 and the defense behind it. We do have in-house proprietary systems that we've built that assist us with this. So to kind of stick with that analogy, you were talking about the fence and how there were certain sections, certain features of that fence that would allow to let you know if there was some sort of breach or opening or issue going on with that particular point, right? So we've done the same thing in the digital sense, into where we've built in-house, we've built proprietary systems that will allow us to do things like, for example, DNS enumeration, which will allow us to, identify new subdomains that might be under your top level domain. We've built automated systems to look for things like lookalike domains. So a common attack vector, especially with phishing, is that threat actors will use, they will register domains with non-Latin characters, so they could be Greek letters, They could be, letters from the Russian alphabet. And what ends up happening in this example is that, the Greek letter A will show up as, the Latin letter A in a domain, but it's a completely different domain name.
Yeah.
And, in fact, we actually identified a similar situation, an exact situation actually with a client of ours in ASM, to where we were monitoring those lookalike domains. We identified that those domains were being registered, actively registered, uh, to look like our client's domain name. We let them know, and they were able to, effectively block that. And we did that all. Well, we identified them automatically, and then we notified them manually. So at least when it comes with us, like a big piece of it is mixing the automated portion with the manual portion. But there's lots of systems like that. The lookalike domains and the subdomain enumeration stuff are just two quick examples, but those are things that we see value and deliver value to our clients all the time. So.
I wanted to ask, one of the things going back to that metaphor, the base, like the reason I think that, we protected that base in the way we did is there were high value assets in that base. So a lot of rotary wing, some fixed wing air assets. Um, so like let's just say it was just me and my company out there on an outpost. We didn't have air assets. We're protecting ourselves. We're going to have a little bit of a different posture. We're not going to have all the resources that we did on that large base. So can you talk to me a little bit about, for attack surface management, what is like the size and scope of a company that would be a good fit for having attack surface management or, needing that? What's that threshold that they should be considering that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really a good fit for a couple of different types of organizations. One is if you're an organization that is grown by acquisition, right? Quite often, what happens in that case is that as you're acquiring that company, you just absorb all of their IT systems, right? And most of the time, what happens is you patch them together and make them work and do what you have to do to make them communicate. And what ends up happening is that as these organizations grow that way, there's just lots of bits and pieces of different infrastructure that were pieced together, and it's real easy for just things to get lost in the shuffle, right? So that's an excellent use case if you've been in a situation like that before. If you're a larger organization with many subsidiaries, that's another example to where it's just a challenge. You might have lots of top level domains that are part of your portfolio of companies, or SBUs for that matter. And it's hard to track all those because there's just so much going on. And then the other one, which we hear about a lot, is organizations that might have a small IT staff, and they want to be more proactive. ASM is an actual excellent option for them because I believe it's something like 80% from Gartner, where they talk about how 80% of security incidents were caused by some sort of external exposure, and that's how they all started. It wasn't necessarily some sort of high level, advanced threat actor doing, super advanced techniques. It was, hey, they left this host open with RDP or something like that, and they just didn't realize it. Um, and so, some of our clients, they're, a couple thousand employees, and they might have a small IT staff or small security staff, and they just want to be a little bit more proactive about it. ASM is an excellent option for them, because we'll be able to identify all those things that are externally facing and things like breach data and all that kind of stuff. Everything they get from us is like a true positive. So, we're not necessarily wasting their time. Like when we send something or we let them know about something, it's true positive. So it helps that smaller IT or security staff manage those things, and be a little bit more proactive. So those are usually the biggest, the three primary organizations that would be a fit. If they have a large tax surface, growing by acquisition, or if maybe you have a limited IT staff or security staff, and you're trying to be a little bit more proactive.
Yeah. So it's like on the one hand, you want to wrap your arms around like what is your attack surface? So like what are all the things that are out there that you may or may not be aware of, especially if you're growing by acquisition? Another part is the ongoing monitoring of what you do have and making sure that when new threats arise, such as the the registering of similar domains, like those things are tracked and they can be defended against. What would be like a lower tier service to ASM, or even an upper tier service? So like if we think of ASM for kind of the profile of a company that you just mentioned, if we take a step down, what are we looking at there?
Well, honestly, a step down from there is probably what most organizations are doing today, which is, annual pen test or, doing pen test twice a year. That would kind of be the step below, below ASM, because, that's ASM is where you start to take the jump towards more continuous monitoring, a more proactive approach to it. So I would say probably, a step below is what most orgs are doing now. Those regular annual pen tests, external network pen tests, and internal network pen tests. Um, and then as far as a step above, you're talking about continuous testing programs to where, you start with attack surface management and then you start to do things like red teaming, or you start to do things like purple teaming. And you start to put together a program, over the course of 12, 24, 36 months to where, yes, you're doing attack surface management. So you're being proactive in that sense, and you're identifying those threats that we've talked about so far. But then you're really starting to step your game up and do a little bit more when it comes to things like I said, red teaming and purple teaming and that kind of stuff. So, um, continuous testing programs, you can almost think of us when we do them. You can almost think of us as an extension of your team. It's like if you had an in-house offensive security team, for all intents and purposes, whatever goals you're trying to achieve. In that sense, we can bake into a continuous testing program, and that's what we do with clients. So it makes things a lot easier for them, because again, they can point us in whatever direction they want to point us in. A lot easier from a contracting and procurement perspective. It's basically just one contract, and they got us whatever they need us for. So yeah, so continuous testing programs would be a step above ASM.
Yeah. So you're kind of going from that, the lower tier is like it's almost compliance driven in a lot of ways. Like you have to do it. You got to do an annual pen test, right? But it's like you're letting compliance be a driver, or you're just doing what you need to do. Whereas ASM, you're moving into that proactive security posture. And then if you continue up to continuous, you're really taking an even more active approach. You're probably doing specific projects that you want to take a look at. So what would be like a red teaming, versus a purple teaming type engagement? Like where is the focus, and what are some of the things that you've done in that arena?
Yeah, sure. So as far as red teaming goes, that's typically objective based, right? So maybe we are an insurance technology company, and we built some algorithm that allows us to process claims, you know, 5 times faster than our competitors, for example. But the point I'm trying to make is maybe our IP is that algorithm that we've developed, right? Um, with the red team engagement and being objective based, the goal would be gain access to that algorithm, right? It's not necessarily like with penetration testing and a lot of other kind of proactive services. It's a very narrowly scoped engagement, meaning, all right, here's our list of IPs, go test them. But with red teaming, it's objective based. And so you basically, in that case, you exclude scope. So, don't do social engineering on the CEO, like things
Right.
like that.
Mhm.
But it's objective based, do what you can to try and gain access to our algorithm or our IP, whatever it is. And that really starts to show, lots of different gaps, not just because red teaming will include things like technical gaps, like, hey, can you find a way into the network through a vulnerability on an asset somewhere, right? And red teaming will find that. Um, but what it also finds is things like process gaps. So the classic calling up the IT help desk and getting password reset, or those types of procedures and processes. Uh, well, one, are they there? And then two, are they actually being followed? Right. So you get to confirm some truths, but at the end of the day, a red team engagement is more about objectives than um, coverage. I'll say, it's a pretty open scope. Um, with purple teaming, it's an extremely collaborative process to where we talk through before we actually get into field work. We talk through, hey, what kind of threat actors would be interested in you, right? The type of industry you're in, the size of your organization, all this kind of stuff. Who is a threat actor that would typically go after somebody like you? And then using MITRE, ATT&CK, and various other methods, we can start to generate tactics, techniques, and procedures related to that particular threat actor. We do all that in the planning phase. And then when we get into the actual field work, what we do is we sit down with you in your defensive side of the house, your blue team, whoever's managing your SOC sim. We sit down with them and we either in person or on a call and we say, all right, well, we're going to try this tactic, right? We run it and we go, hey, did you see it? Pretty much.
Mm.
Yes, no, we didn't, right? And then we walk through and we start to really tune the detections and the setup of your different monitoring software, and just make sure that you're detecting the things one that you think you can detect. You're confirming that, and then helping you to start to detect things that you currently are not detecting. So when it comes to red teaming and purple teaming, those are red teaming, of course, is collaborative too, but purple teaming is literally where we're working hand in hand with you, running something and saying, "Did you see it?" No, we didn't see it. All right, well, this is how you update your sim to see it, right? And it allows you to fine tune your defenses.
Yeah, that distinction is super helpful. So we talked a little bit about, what is ASM, what companies are a good size for that. We kind of broke down, lower tier services, higher tier services. If you had to just summarize the business case for ASM, you're speaking to an executive. Look, this is why we need this. What would be like a quick elevator type pitch for, why we need this?
If I was there making the business case, it would be, my prime example is that, Change Healthcare, exposed data, I think, on two-thirds of Americans, and, billions and billions of dollars that it cost them and others. And that all started because they had a host that they didn't even realize was sitting out there.
Mm.
And it had open permissions basically. So what happened in that case was threat actors found credentials and breach data, and logged into this host that Change Healthcare owned, and ended up ransomwaring the whole company, just because of that. That was because they didn't have coverage. They didn't even realize it was there, right?
Mm.
And so there's a number of different angles you could take, but in that case, it's a pretty cut and dry case to, this is what it could cost. You can start to put the numbers together. There's data from, the various cost of data breach reports and that kind of thing.
Mm.
But it's very clear, and there's lots of examples of it happening
Yeah.
to organizations. And I think if I was making the business case, that's where I would start. We have enough data now to where you can line up the monetary value, but not only that, it's if it's a measure, a lot of businesses today are trying to save costs,
Yeah.
and maximize what their ROI on everything they're spending.
Mm.
And so, in the business case way, you can say, hey, look at, we can have a full staff offsec team, for a quarter of the price it would take for us to build this in house, right?
Yeah.
And so I would include that in the business case as well.
Yeah. I'd say like if you're looking at places to cut costs, like you got to be careful with security. Like that's one place I don't want to cut costs, but at the same time,
Yeah.
you mentioned even using ASM, there is cost value there because to build that team in house, that's going to be pretty cost prohibitive for certain companies, anyways, that don't have the budget for that.
Yeah.
Um, One thing I want to talk about because we've seen this is what I'd call degradation of ASM in the marketplace. So, attack surface management used to be understood to be this suite of things out there. And what I think we've seen is for some companies, they've pared back the value. They're still calling it ASM, but it no longer has the same punch that it used to. And that's something that, we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some, offerings in the market, like you said, that have basically scaled back, and basically what they've done is they've turned it into a fully automated process. And I understand the business case behind it. I get why they're doing that. But at the end of the day, when you turn it into a fully automated process, it's really no better than a vulnerability scan, right? I
Mm.
mean, basically what it is. It's getting better with things like AI and agents and that kind of thing. But, there's still lots of areas where the AI just doesn't have context or fully understand. But, the point is that a lot of the offerings have started to just really become automated things, right?
Mm.
Or they don't communicate nearly as much as they would with the client in the past. Maybe they're only doing quarterly business reviews, right?
Mm.
And the whole, at least in our eyes, one of the main value props of attack surface management is that one, you have full access to us in Teams or Slack or whatever you're using. We do monthly strategy sessions where we go over results, we talk through next steps, and we basically answer any questions that you have. But it's with us too, it's a little bit different to where it's not fully automated. Like I mentioned before, we've built systems to help us. But at the end of the day, the true value is the manual work that goes into it,
Yeah.
which a lot of offerings today are just fully automated solutions. Which again, what was it? They say time equals money, but
Mhm.
really what it is time and energy equals money, right? And so, if you're trying to just use a solution that's just trying to save money, well, that means it's going to take you more time and energy to interpret those results,
Yeah.
identify false positives, all that kind of stuff, because it's just fully automated. Whereas with us, there is very much a manual aspect to it. So when you get something from us with ASM, it's a true positive. It's been vetted. We show you the impact. We give you pretty much everything you need to, either fix it or kind of drive it up the pipeline to get a little bit more buy-in from the business. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the best solutions are a combination of people, process, technology. Like technology is great, but I think when you are stripping out that human touch, that ability to collaborate, to have conversations, to ask questions, like that's a big part of the value prop that's being deprecated. So I do appreciate that approach that you've taken to make sure that we keep that, and I think that is a differentiator for us for sure. Um, Wanted to talk bug bounty program. We've talked about this a little bit, and how over the years there's been a lot of value through things like that, but how maybe now there's less value, or ASM actually can replace some bug bounty programs and provide more value at cost parity or even at a better value.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's probably two things. So one, it comes with scope. So again, bug bounties are similar in penetration testing. Earlier when we were talking about penetration testing versus red teaming, we were saying, here's the scope, right? And so that's what you do in a bug bounty. You say, here's the scope. So, in many ways, a bug bounty is nothing more than just a bigger external or internal, but a bigger penetration test, right? Because here's the scope, here it is. Um, and with ASM, well, again, one of the main value props behind ASM is we're identifying things that you didn't realize were there, right? You didn't even know that was there. With one client recently, we identified that by mistake they had basically zipped up their entire code base, and when they transferred everything to the web host, so they built a web application, and they went to transfer it to the web host, and they didn't realize they had a whole zip file that contained their entire code base, just sitting on that website. And they didn't know that, right? But we identified that and we said, hey, look, the zip file sitting out there with all your stuff on it. You might want to go take that down. And so it's with the bug bounties, you're not understanding, you're not identifying those things that you don't know about, right?
Mhm.
And then the other thing is that there's a lot of noise, I think, that comes with bug bounties. A lot of submissions there that are what many would classify as either informational or non-issues, or just a lot of noise when it comes to the reporting of potential vulnerabilities. And so, yes, the bug bounty vendors do a good amount of triage there, but it still falls on to the organization to, truly identify whether that's a true positive. So again,
Yeah.
they're paying they're paying a similar amount to what you would pay for ASM, but they're still not discovering the unknowns, right? And they're still having to put a lot of time and effort into, verifying true positives and that kind of thing. So what we've seen is that from a value perspective, it feels and it seems, and clients have spoken to us about how it's kind of you're getting more value for the same amount of money spent. So
Just a few more topics I wanted to cover. One was you already touched on this a little bit, but how do we think about packaging ASM differently? You mentioned, some of the things that we do intentionally just because we think it's a better way to do things. It's how we would want to receive the service, such as like the ability to use Slack or Teams to have, instant conversations, monthly calls, manual verification, trying to reduce the burden on the client who's receiving that service.
yeah, I mean, I think you might hear it a lot. I feel like we do a really good job of this though at Risk360 of being a good partner. I mean, and I know that's a very business esque type of response, but
Mhm.
I think we do a really good job of that. And the reason why we do those more frequent reviews, those monthly reviews, for example, and the reason why you're able to talk to us through Slack, Teams, or whatever's easiest for you is because we want to be a good partner to you, and we want to be helpful. We want to provide value, and I think we do a very good job of that. I think you mentioned pretty much all of them. That constant communication, the regular touch points, the combination of people, process, and technology that we've put together. And clients, there's times clients just reach out to us ad hoc and say, "Hey, did you see this?" Or, "Hey, we're having this issue," and we jump on a call with them and we kind of talk through it. Like, what was that? The direct send issue with Microsoft a couple weeks back. A client reached out and said, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk?" Yeah, sure. We talked and, we identified that this was direct send and that the client was having an active phishing campaign against them.
Mhm.
And so I think, the communication and the mixture of people, process, and technology is really what sets us apart. And I think we do a very good job of that.
How can people learn more about ASM or about the offerings from you and the team?
Yeah, we have lots of stuff out there. So our YouTube channel, if you go to risk3sixty.com, there's links there to our YouTube channel. If you want to look at our attack surface management and our other advanced services specifically, you can go to risk3sixty.com/armada. We put out lots of thought leadership. We have tons of videos, both on LinkedIn. We have blog posts. We're actually doing a webinar in a few weeks, but we regularly do webinars. The next one that we're doing is around info stealers and the life cycle around that. Basically, how the threat actors deploy those info stealers, what they do with the information, the path that information takes from victim to actual breach and that kind of thing. So there's lots of stuff out there, but at the start, risk360.com, all of our stuff's there.